Welcome to College Football Monday, brought to you by Jack and Coke. This is a Sons of Saturday live show. Just like last year, each and every week, College Football Monday comes to you, tell you what's going on in the nation, and a heavy dose of what the Hokies are up to. This is our national coverage show with a VT slant, if you will. And in this episode, we're going to recap everything that happened in week 2. We're going to be joined by the Red and White podcast, the NC State podcast. They've got a nice following. One of their reps will be here to talk about what happened in Charlotte. Didn't go so well for the Pack. Didn't go so well. And then at the end of the show, we're going to get into our 12-team playoff predictions. Both Sam and I have redone our predictions over the last couple of weeks. Not too many changes, but we'll get you that. And then we're going to talk about some of the week 3 games that are coming up. There's, it's not always as good as week 1 or week 2, but we still got a lot of good college football action, and it tends to deliver on the weekends that you might not think it's going to. That's what happens in college football. So once Sam signs on, we'll get a cheers going. I did want to let you know that we're going to be at Aslan 7 to 9 p.m., the location in Virginia Beach, the night before the ODU game. Why else would we be in this 757? We got another game at ODU. Not so excited to play there again, but the night before, that might be our time to shine, right? Have some beers. Sam's going to be there hosting. It's going to be a blast. I've got Sam right here. Let me add him to the screen. Hold on.
There we go.
There he is. How you doing, bud? Welcome.
I'm doing well. Let me take the disc. There we go. That's a little bit better.
All right.
It's been a Monday, dude. Been a Monday.
William McCown. This is I think this is Billy Culture. Met him in Nashville. Good guy. Have I recovered yet? Yeah, yes and no. Of course, then I just drank again this past weekend. So it's just a recurring cycle.
Physically or mentally?
Not mentally.
Okay.
Not mentally all the way back, but physically I'm doing all right. Well, thanks for being in the chat. And make sure you guys are subscribed, hopping in the chat as we're getting things kicked off here. Sam, could you give us a cheers? I know I just got you in here, but can I ask you for one?
I actually left my drink.
Go get it.
I'll go grab that. Go grab it right now?
Yeah, go get it.
Okay, I'll grab it right now.
Like I said, we're on our march to 3,000 subscribers. If you could subscribe to the Sons of Saturday channel, we're getting so close. And like the video. That really helps us. It really helps us a lot. We're going to start in 1 second with Texas and Michigan, then do a little bit of Notre Dame talk. Oregon. Not so sure what we're seeing from Oregon quite yet. Nebraska and Colorado, we got to talk about that game, and a few others before we get to our guest at 8:15. And I got Sam back. He's got his drink. I've got mine right here. I'm waiting. Haven't taken a sip yet, buddy. Why don't you kick us off with something?
Dude, it's been a Monday. It's been a Monday. I don't know about you, but this felt like the first chaos Saturday of the year. Usually it takes week 3 or 4, but this was the week where it's college football is all the way back. And my cheers is to Northern Illinois Huskies. The Huskies go into Notre Dame Stadium, whip up on them. That was a great upset. Pretty much knocks Notre Dame out of the playoff. I know we'll talk about it, but just NIU. Shout out to them. They're a well-coached team. They're a proud program. Shout out to the Huskies.
Yeah, cheers.
Adorable live Husky mascot, by the way. I forget his name.
I wanted to bring up the Aslan event. I was talking about it right before you signed on. Sam is going to be there at Aslan 7 to 9 p.m.
Yep.
This Friday, the Virginia Beach location. It's brand new. It looks awesome. There's a putting green. They've got these big storage containers that have been turned on their sides, kind of look like towers. They've got all these outdoor seats. A lot of cool different bars, it looks like, from the pictures.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I'm really excited. It's just kind of a casual hangout event. Get the weekend going, try some great beers, hang out with people. Great games are going to be on. Absolutely great games on Friday night. They have huge screens, so should be a fun night.
Sweet. All right, let's get to week 2. Texas crushed Michigan, Sam, 31-12. Very little resistance from that Michigan defense.
Yep.
And Quinn Ewers was balling, an 89.6 QBR in the day, 3 touchdowns. And on the flip side, the Michigan quarterback, a position that they haven't been so sure what's going on, they might not have an answer, period, at that position.
Yeah, remember Alex Orgy from Virginia Tech's recruitment? You know, this is why I didn't have Michigan in my preseason playoff. It's why I've kind of written them off. They look a lot more like a 9-3 team than they do anything else. And in Texas, man, they reloaded at the wide receiver position and they reloaded on the defensive line and they just look stacked, dude. Like they only scored 31. They probably could have put up 40. I mean, they started to slow the tempo there.
And they missed a field goal, right?
Missed a field goal. Like, we've got Devin in the chat with a Devin, I think it might have a lot more to do with they lost like 7 NFL players on their defense and
and their head coach too.
And their head coach.
Although they were missing him for a number of games last year.
That's
but
true.
This is the second year in a row now we've seen Texas go into one of these really difficult places to play and come out with the victory against a top 10 team. I mean, that's not a fluke now. Like Alabama was not a fluke and this was not a fluke.
I mean, the Texas is back conversation is done because they're back. Yeah. I mean, they are a national power now, and it's just going to keep going. If you look at their recruiting classes, if you look at the guys they're attracting the transfer portal, like the horns are all the way back. And I love it. I think it's great for the sport that one of the big boys is actually winning. It draws more eyeballs to the televisions. It's going to look awesome when that stadium is filled up and night game. It's going to be sweet.
Yeah. Let's move to Northern Illinois, and Notre Dame was part of your cheers. NIU pulls off the win 16-14. And this, again, you want to talk about not being fluky. Notre Dame got outgained by over 100 yards in this game. Leonard threw 2 interceptions, just 163 yards passing for their transfer quarterback, a 26 QBR, which is pretty horrendous for a team of that caliber, a team that was in the top 5. And NIU dominated time of possession. Whoa. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know how much eyes you got on this game because you were at our game,
a little bit
but
busy, yeah.
you were, catching up on the weekend, and this is just a brutal loss.
So someone the row ahead of us somehow had enough service to be able to stream the game on his phone. So my brother-in-law were kind of looking over his shoulder, watching this game a little bit towards the end. I mean, NIU, what their coach say, we didn't need no luck. They didn't. They just straight up beat Notre Dame. They had a higher success rate. They had a higher yards per play. They had a higher expected points added per drop back. They had a higher expected points added per play.
They crushed them.
They just beat them.
Yeah.
And again, Notre Dame, they fall into the same line as Michigan, where like there was a reason a lot of people didn't have them in their college football playoff. People said they beat Texas A&M. They're a surefire in. No, this was always going to happen. I'll tell you, this isn't the first time Marcus Freeman has had something like this happen at Notre Dame where they have lost as a multi-touchdown favorite at home. It probably won't be the last. They do have to host Miami, Ohio, who is the team projected to win the MAC this year. So, he is on eggshells in South Bend.
Yeah, and Tom Fornelli talked about it. Marcus Freeman got himself fired on Saturday. And he didn't mean immediately, and he might not even mean the end of this season, but I can't disagree because now that's just in the AD's mind. It's in Booster's mind. Like, we've lost 2 of these G5 games at home.
Yeah, and you also have a loss to Stanford, a pretty bad Stanford team. You have that loss to Marshall. You haven't done a lot else from that.
A close loss to Ohio State is like maybe the best
on a coaching gaffe.
Yeah,
like they win that game if they have the right number of players on the field.
And they just beat Texas A&M, which we thought was like a really nice win. And if me and you had been on this show last week, and I missed the show last Monday, we might have projected ND to be in the playoff. And like that ain't happening.
And they got up for that game, you could tell.
Yeah,
but they looked. I watched some of the highlights from that NIU game, dude. They looked slow, physically slow. I think they were exhausted. They were not mentally in it. And that's the difference between teams that win 8-9 games and teams that win 10+. Teams that win 10+ are ready to go every single week. Notre Dame just wasn't there. And Riley Leonard, I think he's one of those players where we like the idea of Riley Leonard a little bit more than we are in love with the person, or not the person, the football player, Riley Leonard.
And he has a penchant for getting nicked up too. And if he makes it through this entire season, I'd be a little shocked. And maybe that's just piling on, but I think that's a legitimate concern as well. They were 4-touchdown favorites, Sam. This is probably the biggest upset of the season. Like it very well could be.
It's really rare for multiple 28 plus upsets to happen.
And we almost had to. And we'll talk about Penn
Almost
State a
had
little
to.
bit later.
Almost had to. The fighting Scott Lefflers.
Oregon escapes against Boise 37-34. That was just a wild game. Boise threw everything they had at them. And it's not like Madsen, their quarterback, even had a great game. It was just Genty going for 200 total yards. That guy is a monster. And even though Oregon's offense with Gabriel, like it looks efficient on paper, but it's really not very good.
That's the thing. Like, and I know it's like, don't be a nerd, watch the games. Like, yeah, I get it. They're kind of dominating these games and then they just don't get in the end zone. It's really weird. I feel like it is somewhat of, they're going to have a progression to the mean in the box score here coming up, hopefully for them before Ohio State.
Yeah.
I think you got to give credit to Boise State. Their defense stepped up to be much better this week. Ashton Genty has got to be the leader in the Heisman race right now. He's on pace to break Barry Sanders' record. I understand
he's 1-1, but the win is over a G5 team. So like, let's just hold on.
Just
like
saying.
A G5 guy to win the
saying.
Heisman, he's going to have to do, like you said, he's going to have to break the Sanders record.
He's on pace for it. Obviously, it's just 2 games, but I mean, if he has 2,500 yards and a bunch of touchdowns, he's at least getting invited to New York.
And considering his schedule, he's going to pile up stats.
Well, that's the thing too.
If
there are going to be some games where they don't have to play.
It would have been huge.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, it's weird, man. What's going on with Oregon? Like, I'm going to pull up some of the advanced stats here while you're talking, but
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is like we need to open up a little bit of a dialogue on Oregon because they have looked extremely underwhelming. And who would have thought, bringing in Dylan Gabriel and losing Bo Nix, you'd be questioning the offense more.
So this is going to be really nerdy inside baseball, but it really does paint the picture of their offense right now. Their success rate in this game was 46%. That means 46% of their plays were, successful in terms of the yard, downs, and distance.
Mm-hmm.
That's 75th percentile for all games from 2022 till now between FBS and FBS teams. But then their EPA per play was minus 0.12, which is 25th percentile. So they're doing what the down and distance tells them to do, but they're not really going above and beyond that at any point. And I don't know if that's play calling. I don't know if that's just like dumb luck. They're taking what the defense is giving them, but that's weird. Like that normally doesn't happen. Those are usually positively correlated.
I don't blame them for having a close game against Boise State. Boise State's a good team, and they're close rivals in terms of region. And it's just weird to me, though, when I see Dylan Gabriel's throwing for 85% completion on the year, and they didn't play well either week. Like it's just strange. It's very strange. But I am feeling fairly good about our first week's playoff pick of Boise State right now. That's probably going to reoccur later on.
They're going to roll through.
Not that they don't have competition. We'll talk about their competition from the G5 later. We're going to do VT Corner in a little bit after we have our guest, but let's do Nebraska and Colorado before we get to our guest real quick. Nebraska made easy work of Deion Sanders and the Buffaloes. It was 28-0 before Colorado scored. Shador's QBR was pretty much garbage. He threw his O-line under the bus. He left the field early. I mean, this was kind of an all-around disaster for Colorado.
It went exactly as most people thought it would. What are you talking about? Like that's the least surprisable outcome of that game. Yes, I do need a nerd koozie. I would love one. I just don't like. They're a one-trick pony. Like that whole program right now is a one-trick pony.
Yeah,
they line up in shotgun. They'll go 4 or 5 wide. They'll send a bunch of guys deep. That's really it. Like they don't use a tight end. They don't have a running back. Their offensive line is terrible. Their defense isn't any good. Their kicker, who, for some reason, Deion Sanders thinks he has Janikowski back there kicking the ball. Like it's everything about that program is worst case scenario almost. And I'm genuinely worried about Shador's health at this point.
I mean,
Like
6 sacks and 10 TFL from
he's
Nebraska.
he is an NFL quarterback. Like he has the tools. It's getting to the point where you might, I hate saying this, but like if it doesn't get any better, does he sit out? Because
They
dude,
toss that around on cover 3, and like it's the most plausible thing that's going to happen. Is
would
like
you blame him?
they're gonna. I wouldn't blame him, but I also like. It's just it would be so on brand too. Like
It would.
there's no will. I feel like for them to be a team, there never has been, and
No,
it's been
it's
all about him getting to the NFL.
yeah, it's sad, dude, because he's so good.
He's
And
really
Travis Hunter is the best football player in the country. And it's like they're being overshadowed by
And once those
nonsense.
two guys are gone, what's that program going to look like?
Probably like Colorado 4 years ago.
So Dion has not necessarily raised the bar outside of his kin. It's not like Raiola lit it up either, but their run game was working, and the Nebraska defense was lights out. I mean, the penetration, the offensive line for Colorado was just a sieve. Could be a long year for Dion and the Buffs as long as they decide they want to play and participate. They were joking about on cover 3, like, will Dion finish the year? But you know how Bud Elliott has been hating on the Dion experiment.
I kind of wish they were somewhat good. Like, I wish they were good enough to lose in bigger games.
And
because right now they're just losing in like mediocre games.
Yeah, I don't think in this season, can they still compete for the Big 12? I think they could, but their line is so bad. I think that's going to be what holds them back. Plus, I think Utah's pretty darn good, and Iowa State proved to be pretty good. We'll talk about the Cy-Hawk. As we wait for the NC State guys, we will talk about Oklahoma State. I think that's what I have next. That was an absolutely crazy game. And I'm so pissed off. This was my worst beat of the weekend. I had Arkansas plus 7.5. And when a game goes to overtime and you've got a team 7.5, there is one way you can lose that bet. And it's for it to go to triple and for the opposing team to score first and get the 2-point conversion. And that is exactly what happened. And it's not just about my bet. It was about Arkansas letting this one absolutely slip away. It was an all-around disaster. Sam Pittman needed this game.
Yeah, talk about coaches who got fired this week. Sam Pittman's probably out. Like, that's a pseudo rivalry game there too. And to lose it in that fashion and to have the schedule coming up that they do, man, it's just another program that just has bad vibes right now. And I don't think it's going to get any better. Taylor Green's awesome though.
He's the quarterback for Arkansas. Taylor Green is what Sam's talking about. He is very good, and he could end up leading them to a few extra wins. But like this should have been one of those extra wins, and it would have been in a really. I mean, OK State's a pretty good team, and it was at their stadium.
Calling it right now. If you're a bettor, I would start to fade Oklahoma State here. Just saying.
I mean, I think I definitely took Arkansas this past week, and I think I took OK State to cover a week.
Yeah, they're gonna get some lofty spreads. Start going the other direction here.
And and they needed that intercept in the first half. Arkansas's defense was shutting them down. Like they got that pick 6. Otherwise, they really couldn't do anything. It was really kind of an odd comeback, to be quite honest. And there were bad penalties on Arkansas, and like I said, they let it slip through their fingers. But I do see our guest in the chat. I'm going to add him to the screen. We are welcoming in Evan from the Red and White podcast. Evan, how are you doing today, buddy?
I've been better, fellas. Not gonna lie.
It was a tough weekend down in Charlotte. Were you at the game?
No, I was not. No.
You were not. Well, I'm sure you're grateful for that. But I did hear the atmosphere prior to the game was very bowl game-esque, and people were having fun.
Yeah, I had PTSD from the last time State played Atlanta. I mean, State played Tennessee. We were in Atlanta that time, and similar thing happened. So I didn't choose to go this time. But yeah, kudos to the Pack fans who did show up. I heard it was a great environment. We had a great showing, which you never know in those situations where it's close to home and it can be too easy to kind of like, just, I'll get you next time or whatever. But and then Tennessee fans rolled deep and they could have taken over the stadium, but State fans showed up. Too bad the football team did not.
it looked pretty even, like from the overhead shots and just the shots of the stadium. And that stadium, Bank of America, it's not easy to fill up. Like those corners and that top is hard. And it was dang near full, if not all the way full.
Yeah, I mean, again, State fans did a great job showing up. The program did not, but the fans did. Kudos to them.
We know something about that, man, because me and Sam went down to Nashville for the Vandy game, and the Tech fans showed up, and the team didn't. And that what Evan's referring to is Tennessee beat NC State 51-10, just 143 yards of offense for the Wolfpack and 3 offensive points. And it was 10-3 through about 26 minutes before the wheels came off for State. Like, it was a decently close game. Not that the Pack was playing good, but they were holding their own. And it quickly got to 37-3 in the third quarter. And it was salvage mode at that point. And I'm going to turn to you on this. How surprised were you by the result? How were you feeling prior to the game?
I can't say I was super confident. I mean, I know what Tennessee is and I know what we are, so I'm not delusional. I'm disappointed that we didn't show up. I thought we would prior to the game. I thought it would be a tough matchup for us, but I wanted to see us punch up a little bit. And that was kind of what I was looking for. And I think a lot of State fans were.
Yeah.
And we didn't. Right. So I just, I don't know. Yeah. I had low expectations going in and even lower coming out with it. It's just hard to believe.
That's always a tough matchup too. When you're going against, even though Nico's a new quarterback, he'd been in the system for a year, and you're going up against one of the premier offensive coaches, and you're NC State, who has largely had to rebuild that defense. Like, this was not a good game to have week 2. Week 4, week 5, I think you'd feel a little bit better, but this was a really tough spot from NC State. And Pete, we talked about that in the season previews and all of that. This was just a tough spot to get Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, there were some good matchups going into it, right? We had a chance and it wasn't even the defensive side of the ball. I mean, look at the box score. You're like, oh man, defense sucked. But Pete said, it was 10-3 with 3 minutes left in the half, and then we throw a pick 6, and they just quit after that. So the defense kept us in it, and they played well. It was more, to me, the offense's inability once again early in the season to do anything, and that is just mind-boggling. How you reload the offense, you bring in a ton of skill guys, upgrade all the positions, and then you just 3 points.
Yeah. What do you think the problem was on offense? And you talked a little bit about, like, it reminds you of last year. Like, what is the major malfunction? I'm looking at the 13 tackles for loss. Is it as simple as the line wasn't very good? What do you think?
How long is this show going to be?
Yeah, I was going to say, Pete, we only got like an hour.
No, I mean, it's the offensive line really is the biggest problem, right? I think they are suspect in blocking. We had trouble blocking Western Carolina, which everybody kind of rolled up to. They were looking at Tennessee, and I get it, but they can't open holes for any of the running backs, and the scheme is just not fitting of the personnel, which is kind of the weird part about it. Dave Doeren has got this mentality of being a tough, hard-nosed running team, but we haven't been able to run the football in like 6 years. Like, I can't tell you the last time we had a good offensive line and a strong enough run game to support us. Maybe 2017, and that's a terribly long time in college football world.
Yes,
and I just don't think they're utilizing what they have. To me, that's the biggest problem.
They went after Grayson McCall in the transfer portal. They bring him in. The year prior, they go out, they get Brennan Armstrong, they bring him in. You got Robert and him and Armstrong had this thing, and he's a well-respected QB coach, OC, whatever. And it seems like we're kind of having the same issue again. Is that what you're seeing?
That's exactly what I'm seeing, and that's what's so frustrating about it, because you think, all right, last year's like, we didn't have any wide receivers outside of KC, so this year they go get a bunch of wide receivers. Talent all over the place, and they just do the same dumb things. And like, I was super high on Grayson McCall, and I watched him for 3 years at Coastal Carolina. I thought he would be a good fit for what Anai wants to do, like get the ball to guys in space and just keep things open, not have to win the game by yourself. Like, I just thought he would be the perfect quarterback for that. And I don't know if it's what they're asking him to do, or him not being 100%. Like I've been starting to think that his injury last year kind of shook him, where he got carted off the field in Coastal Carolina. It was his last game. He had a really bad head injury. He just doesn't seem to be playing with that same level of confidence. And I don't know what it is. Like, I know he's not got the biggest arm. I'm not trying to fool anybody. I think he's an NFL caliber quarterback, but he should be good enough to get the ball into the hands of the guys you have.
Mm-hmm.
And really the disappointing part of an eye is, if you ask me what the identity was for NC State's offense, I have no idea what to tell you. Like, are we air raid? Are we spread? Are we a power team? I have no idea. And I think that is a problem, because I don't think the players know either. They just don't act like it. And
Sam, this sounds too familiar.
I'll tell you what, for people who are listening who aren't Tech or NC State fans, like, people say these fan bases are alike for a lot of reasons. This is one of them. Like, dude, I almost though think that UVA team with Brennan Armstrong, and I actually worked covering UVA football for that year in a previous job, but that was probably just such a lightning in the bottle year. And I'm wondering if we're chasing that with Robert and I. Like,
absolutely.
Because that team they had Dontavian Wicks. They had guys all over the field.
The big tight
offensive
end
line was decent. Brennan Armstrong was healthy. Like, they were in a lot of shootout games.
But didn't Anai have a good track record at Syracuse too? Didn't he kind of make Schrader better?
The 1 year with Schrader, and did he make him better?
It was like a half a year.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm just wondering, like, Robert and I probably is a good coach, but are we chasing something with him that isn't really there? And but I think NC State will be fine looking forward. Luckily for them, they have a pretty favorable ACC schedule. That defense is they're going to have a good defense. It's going to get better throughout the year. The Tennessee game got away from them. They're going to figure things out. Raleigh's still one of the tougher places to play in the ACC. They'll be fine. But I think from what we've seen so far, the dark horse ACC champion conversations and the 10-win goal that has eluded Pac fans for decades now, it just doesn't seem to be. They haven't clicked yet. They don't look anywhere near that level of team.
And that's the problem, though. This is how they started last year, right? Brennan Armstrong struggled. I don't know what they were asking him to do too much. And then, they tried to go to MJ Morris, and that didn't work. And then they brought Brennan Armstrong back in, and they simplified the offense. And hey, look, things worked.
They had a nice season,
and they ended up playing well at the end of the year,
beating the crap out of us. That's for sure.
Yeah, and they just, why are we doing the same thing over again? Why are you not adjusting to your parts? Right, adjust your offense to what you have, and just simplify. It's college football. It shouldn't be that hard. Throw it deep, right? Or try to run it. If you can't, spread them out and run it somewhere else, right? Don't just try to play power gap scheme stuff when your O-line can't run block and your running back doesn't fit the gap schemes. It's just, I don't know. It's just maddening to me.
Can we take a step back and just talk about Dave Doeren in a bigger picture, and maybe your thoughts and the fan base's thoughts, as you will be a representative of them in this case, going into this year, your overall thoughts on Dave Doeren as a coach? Was the fan base behind him?
It's been a love-hate relationship over the last few years. He's evolved to the point where, he brought in Tony Gibson, changed his defense from the Huxtable bend but don't break nonsense. And then he brought in Robert and I, and that was the hope that he was going to do the same thing on offense, and they would mix it up and be more dynamic. And hey, look, you're not the most talented team, so you better out-scheme some people, right? You better have something that you do really well. And when they went out and they had all the NIL money, had a huge NIL budget, they got a bunch of guys, and the hype was there, man. Everybody was believing, like, all right, Dave's turned this thing around. He's going to keep elevating it. And to Dave's credit, he's raised the floor of the program. He's consistently been, 8 wins for the most part. And that's fine. But I think State fans and everybody else, why are we playing? I'm not playing to win 8 games. I'm playing to win, right? I want to win more.
At least once in a while, right? You're not asking for wins every year, but you're asking for it when you gear up, because NC State has had these years, like the Dennis Leary coming back year. Last year, bringing in Brennan Armstrong. It's like, or maybe starting MJ Morris. I don't know. You're like, this could be the year. Look at all those linebackers we have. We can win 10 games. And it just seems to fall a little short. And if I was a State fan, because we were in these shoes with Fuente, It's like, why? What was the major malfunction this time? Like, why did it not happen this time? And Sam and I talked about how aggressively Doeren and the staff was in the portal before the season. And it's like, man, they are really loading up. Like a sneaky one of the best portal on paper off seasons that we saw. And it's odd. And maybe because of that, all of that change, do you think it will start to come together? We're talking to you 2 days after a really tough loss. And so, you have to kind of put that to the side and think, do you think it'll come together as we move forward?
I mean, historically, yes, it'll come together, right? He'll do well enough to bring it back together and win some games. But the opportunity to make the AC championship game is right in front of you. And if they don't do something more drastic, right? We haven't learned from last year. If we don't adjust and just change the way you approach things, then I don't see it, right? I struggle to see State having the success they want. Now, they'll probably win 8 games, just like you said, because the schedule's easy. Yeah. But after that, like, I don't know, man. It's disappointing to me that we're in the same position again.
From the outside, it looks like Dave Doeren in the transfer portal era has made a concerted effort to get really old players, 4th and 5th year players out of the portal to stay old as a team, to have experience. I mean, you saw that bringing in Brennan Armstrong, bringing Grayson McCall, obviously, but other guys that they've brought in. And I'm wondering if it is just not the right pieces. It's just kind of the old proven ones. And if they kind of have gotten a little too reliant on the transfers at this point. And this is more of a broad college football question. I mean, we were just talking about Colorado, how terrible they look versus a Nebraska team that has had, a lot of those guys who are on Nebraska have been in the program 2-3 years. Like it can't be easy as a coaching staff to get guys ready in the spring and fall camp. And then like, all right, now you're playing Tennessee on a neutral field. Go get them, guys. Like that can't be easy. And what a lot of people also kind of forget is you have very limited practice time in the spring and you have very limited practice time in the fall. Like you don't have an NFL practice schedule out there. So these teams that are transfer heavy or have new quarterback wide receiver combinations, they're not usually going to be ready early on.
I don't know if it's too much reliance on transfers. Like I do understand the chemistry part of that, and they've got to come together. But it's not like he's taking bums, right? I think he's taken talent and tried to fill in needs. But we've also recruited some high school talent. They've got guys, but they're not utilizing them. I don't care what the transfers are. You're rolling out walk-on tight ends, expecting them to block SEC caliber defensive ends, and you're like, oh, I don't know why it didn't work. Like I'll tell you why it didn't work, because the guy's a bum. It's less about the transfers and more about how they're utilizing them to me.
Yeah, and the other thing that I was curious about with Doeren and just the transfer thing in general, we saw MJ Morris kind of get a bad taste in his mouth last year. Jordan Houston left the team preseason just about. And those could be one-off, very unique circumstances, but it was amazing to me that they got to 9 wins last year with that type of stuff happening, because it seemed like you had 2 starters quit on the team. And that's the kind of stuff, not that we saw that exactly in our previous staff, but we saw a lot of transfers just decide this program wasn't for them. They're getting out of here. And is that a red flag to you, or is that just like, those are a couple bad eggs?
Maybe a bit of both there. I think it's more, I would never doubt Dave's ability to build a sound culture. I think
that's good.
I think it's more about the bad eggs there and the situation didn't fit. And we had some things where we kept a lot of guys around that probably shouldn't have been on the roster beforehand, just because we were offering them, we tried different things from a NIL perspective, right? Paying a bunch of guys and just to keep everybody there. And in theory, but honestly, it wasn't the right way to go about it. So I think it's more those guys being outliers than Dave losing the team. Like, I just don't think that's not his MO.
And he clearly didn't lose the team because even though
Right,
Brennan
yeah.
Armstrong wasn't perfect, you figured out a way to win games. So the outlook on the rest of the season, let's go to that. We talked about the ACC title game, and this is a year where the ACC is more wide open than maybe it has been in a decade. What you think about Miami, we don't know what Miami is yet. And so Clemson seems a little vulnerable. Florida State, they might already be eliminated with their 2 losses in the conference. And then a couple of the preseason favorites, and us and you and Louisville, like there's a chance for all of these teams. You got to go to Clemson, you got to go to Cal, you got to go to Georgia Tech, and you got to go to, or you're hosting NIU in 2 weeks, the now ranked NIU Huskies.
Yeah.
Can't overlook those Huskies, and you get Syracuse at home. How are you feeling on the win total? You mentioned 8 games. How likely is that to you?
I still feel 8's probably pretty likely.
Okay.
I mean, I think a lot of those games, I don't know. I don't want to disparage them because that would be too optimistic given what I've seen from NC State. But at the same time, I don't know if I necessarily believe all of those teams are legit, right? I mean, we saw Georgia Tech beat FSU and then go to Syracuse and lose, right? And we've seen, Cal beats Auburn, but who knows what the hell Auburn is? They don't have a quarterback. So it's kind of I don't know if I'll change my projection. I had us 10-2 going into this season. That was my season prediction, but I obviously know that's less likely now. Right? Clemson's still the one on your schedule you have to beat.
Yep.
And I think everybody else is beatable. Right? It comes, the at-Cal game seems a little bit harder now, but I don't think it's insurmountable being on the road. So,
next week's Louisiana Tech, right? So that's a pretty darn good bounce back opportunity. Get them in Raleigh. That's not a very good La Tech team. So NC State will be fine, right? A lot of people weren't banking on them winning this game anyways, whether you lose it 100-0 or 1-0. It doesn't matter. Like it's a loss, it's a loss. You move on. It's the exact same situation we had after the Vanderbilt game. Like it sucks, but it's a non-conference game. We weren't expecting him to go undefeated. You move on.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking today, would I have rather lost 51-10 to Tennessee, or would I have rather lost in overtime to Vanderbilt on the road?
Tech's kind of done both of those before.
Tennessee.
I think I gotta take the Tennessee.
Like you don't know. We don't know how good Tennessee is. Right? I know State looked like crap, but we don't know how good Tennessee actually is. They haven't allowed a offensive touchdown in 12 quarters, I think, at this point, right? And that goes back through the Iowa Bowl game. Mm-hmm. So, and they still could be there, probably still a top 10 team, right? So, I mean, Tennessee, I'd rather lose to them than.
Yeah, because it's about the name on the jersey, right, Evan? Right. It's you see that Vandy, and like, trust me, me and Sam were sick about it for a good 5 days. I'm not sure we're over it yet. I mean, we're past the Marshall game, and I still don't feel too damn good about it. But listen, a little bit of a tough start for NC State, but I do think they have just as good of odds of getting into that championship game as almost anyone else in the conference. I think Miami would be like who we're thinking right now. Clemson, those would be the 2 favorites to be in there, but Louisville, I mean, that's going to be a tough team to beat. And then who knows, man? Because I would say Florida State, SMU. I'm
SMU looks terrible.
Yeah, they look real bad.
They're a mess.
Look, they have all their ACC games, but based on what we've seen and the knowledge we have, I think I'm kind of eliminating them from ACC contention. Maybe Cal would put their nose in there, but I'm not thinking UNC. I'm not thinking Duke. It's really like this pool of 5 to 6 teams, which I hope that we're still included in, but I'm not even sure.
I think you're probably right. It's kind of wide open. I don't think we know enough about anybody right now to really pass judgment.
Welcome to Coastal Chaos.
Yeah, for the whole conference.
Do you think this is in part because, and this is obviously tongue in cheek, but like the NC State sports luck did you use it all up in the spring?
Yeah. Ask me that in December. And I'll tell you.
Like, is it?
Yeah. I don't think luck had anything to do with beating Tennessee. I think it was more stupidity.
Yeah. I think
than
Sam's
anything
referring to the extreme good fortune and well-earned good fortune that happened in the NCAA tournament for both of your teams. That was an
And
awesome
baseball.
run.
And
Everyone
baseball,
loves-
right? Yeah,
yeah, and
we won
baseball.
everything
Lag.
this year, and
Yeah.
I think that kind of fed into the optimism that hey, the football team did a lot of good things in the offseason. Maybe they'll be next.
A
Mhm.
friend of mine
And-
from Raleigh said he made a joke that they needed to change the light bulbs, the red light bulbs on the tower because they had to keep light red.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So
Yeah, that I loved watching them beat UNC in the championship game. That was sweet. Everyone loved watching DJ Burns the entire run. So
yeah, absolutely.
anyway, I want to ask you, where can people find your stuff? Let them know. Plug anything you got going on. What's up next for you guys?
Yeah, we record live Sunday and Wednesday. You can find us on redwhitenetwork.com, at Red White Podcast on Twitter. All the stuff kind of goes through there. It's kind of where we send people. But
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was checking you guys out as I was preparing for this, and it seems like you've built a really nice following over the years. And I think Sam talked to you guys about a year ago, right, Sam?
yep, they were on behind enemy lines for the NC State game. So it's been awesome.
We've been doing it now. We've about hit 400 episodes. So I've been doing it for God knows 8 years, 10 years, something like that.
Very nice.
And yeah, we have a great community. It's super active. We have awesome conversations during games, and yeah, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, listen, we wish you better luck as you move on to Louisiana Tech. Until we
thanks.
meet you in the ACC championship game, we'll be rooting on the Pack.
I'll throw you up a go.
I love it. Same for y'all. I appreciate it, fellas.
All right, Evan. Talk to you later.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Evan.
Bye. All right. That does it for our guest segment. Thank you, Evan, for coming on with us. Check out Red and White Pod if you have any interest in the Wolfpack at all. They do a really, really nice job. And he was generous with his time, and you could tell he was hurt. You could tell he was still hurting.
Yeah, it's a rough start to the year for them. I mean, I think they're kind of at a point as a program where they need to figure out what do they need to do to take the next step forward. Good news for them is they do have a very aggressive and well-built NIL structure now at NC State. Like, they have gotten behind it very well. I think it's similar to what Virginia Tech has done. They're not going to outbid anybody, but they're going to be competitive in that space. So I think they'll be all right. Dave Doeren's a good coach. They lost so much from that team last year defensively, and they relied on that defense so much. It was always going to be tough, that matchup.
Yeah. All right. Well, as I said at the top of the show, College Football Monday is brought to you by Jack and Coke. Two legends, one can, Jack and Coke. You can see the can on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. The #1 cocktail in the world is now available in a can. That's right. Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey mixed with Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola Zero. Sugar are available in a can at your local grocery and convenience stores. Two legends, one can, Jack and Coke. Ready to drink. RTD, remember that. And as always, drink responsibly. I am drinking a little something over here, Sam. And before we get to our ACC notes, because I want to get to ACC and then I want to get to playoff stuff, I am drinking the Oktoberfest. I didn't ask you. Are you drinking alcohol or are you just chilling?
We got a glass of ice cold sweet tea right
Okay.
now.
Very nice.
In the Hokie house. It's not a house, it's a home.
Always respect that. Yinling Oktoberfest. This is something you can probably only find in the greater Philadelphia area, all throughout PA, maybe. Harder to find outside of that, even though you can get Yinling itself everywhere. This is a classic Marsden style lager. And we were having that conversation last week, Sam, about Oktoberfest, fest beer. And one of our listeners sent an article distinguishing them. And it depends on who you ask. Like, there is the traditional Marsdens, and then there may be lighter Oktoberfest. But I was talking to my brewing friend the other day, and like, the difference isn't so much. And it depends on the region, because we all know Vienna Lager, Devil's Backbone, many other companies will make a Vienna. And a Vienna Lager and an Oktoberfest and a Marsden, they're all kind of in the same family. Like, they're very, very similar. Little bit of malt. Some have more, some have less. This one is very easy to drink, is what I would say about the Yinling. Whenever I see it, I always get a 6-pack at least every year if I see it in the store, because they only make it for a very short period of time, but I like it. It's crisp, it's light, and compared to some other Margins, which I do think can be a little too heavy. This one is so easy to drink. So I would grab this if you see it. Yingling Oktoberfest.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll have the autumnal beers have begun
Mm-hmm.
for me. So on Wednesday's Too Deep show, I'll have some, we'll start the pumpkin beers.
Perfect. All right. ACC notes. We talked about it a little bit with Evan. Syracuse looked real impressive in their win over Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was flying high, beating Florida State. Then they come home, they get a nice win over a bad team, and they're going up to the Dome. And it was in the chat, we're going around like, I like this play coming up this weekend, and a couple people like Georgia Tech. And I, being the old school fear of the Dome guy I am, I was like, I do not like that one bit for Georgia Tech. They've been traveling a ton. They had to go to Ireland, come home. Now they got to go to New York. I liked Q's +5. I'm not bragging about my picks. It happened to be one I get.
Brag about it. We both had the orange.
This looked like a spot for a new, unknown Syracuse team to have a nice game. And what do you know? They go out there, they have a nice game. They beat the 2-0 Jackets. And McCord, I mean, this is someone we have to worry about later in the season.
Oh yeah. And I'm going to actually credit to Syracuse. They had a really good game. People are talking about like they blew out Georgia Tech. It was a 3-point win. Georgia Tech looked really good offensively.
They were up a lot and Georgia Tech came back, but Georgia Tech could have won.
Could have won that game. Yeah. So this was a pretty even game for the most part. I'm going to flip it on the other side though. This was just classic Georgia Tech under Brent Key. Like they have really high ups and then they just have weeks where they don't show up, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And Florida State's offense is just terrible, right? So holding Florida State to 21 in Ireland, good for them. It's probably what you would expect at this point. Then they played a very bad team last week. This week, they just got shredded. And I think this is more of Syracuse is going to be a good offensive team, probably not a great defensive team, but they're going to be good offensively. And Georgia Tech is not going to be able to perform at a high level week to week. They haven't done it yet under Brent Key.
Yeah. And while it was a 3-point margin and Georgia Tech did have a chance to win at the end, Syracuse outgained them 515 to 378, out first down them 27-19. They should have won the game and they did win the game. And this is a big win for that program. I know it may be just Georgia Tech, but Georgia Tech was 2-0 and people had a high opinion of them. And Fran Brown and McCord, they're going to get a lot of hype after this. They got Stanford, they got Holy Cross, and they got a trip to UNLV, which is super weird, but like those are 3 very winnable games.
Yeah, they are. And I think Thomas brings a great point. Like, what if everyone's just kind of mediocre? It's a possibility.
That's the ACC way. Like no one can have a nice thing for more than like a couple weeks in a row. So Georgia Tech had their 2 weeks, and now, Syracuse is going to have their couple of weeks, and maybe they'll go out and they'll lose at UNLV. Like, isn't that Barry Odom? Like
that's Barry Odom. That's a pretty good UNLV team. I worry long-term about Syracuse this season. They did make some good transfer portal additions, didn't really make any on the line of scrimmage. If they get injuries to any of those 9 positions, I guess you could say, on the offensive line and defensive line, they might be in some trouble like they were last year because they're too deep. Drink.
Yeah, I got you.
Is not very good on the line of scrimmage. I mean, they got blown off the ball the second half of last season. I could kind of see the same thing happening this year.
And that's what I'm banking on, actually, Sam. It's something we talked about in our previews. By the time we get to the Syracuse game, our biggest advantage is depth, not scheme, not players. It is going to be depth. And I think, hey, I don't wish injury on anyone. It's just a fact of what happens in college football. So we'll see what happens in the Dome later on in the year. Clemson smacked App State 66-20. It was 42-0. And this is a proud program, the Mountaineers. They play these big teams tough all the time. And I was kind of projecting, App State to cover the points. It was a 17-point margin. This was not close. Clemson was angry. They showed that they were angry. Klubnik had 5 touchdowns, highest QBR in the country this past weekend for Cade Klubnik, 99.6, almost a perfect score. Really impressive to me to blast App State like that. They took out their frustrations.
A friend of mine who watched that game real closely, the one thing he pointed out was it looked like Clemson was running the same 2 or 3 plays over and over again, and App State just couldn't figure it out. Like every single time they were in the same route tree and same concepts, and a different guy was wide open.
Yeah.
And so credit to Clemson. I think they exercised some demons in this game, but also App State, we expected them to take this big leap forward as a team to maybe compete for the playoff. We might have done, I think the name on the jersey might have sold some people more than the actual team, because they hadn't shown for the last few years that they're at a 10 plus win level. And then you saw on that field, like they weren't even close athletically. Obviously,
Wasn't App State the team that upset JMU last year, though?
I think they were, but really, did they upset JMU? They might have.
That was the game day, right? Like that was game day in JMU.
No. That was, yes, it was. They won at JMU. You're correct. They did win at JMU.
They still have that big time.
They have that.
They have it. And this, I just feel like this is a good win for Clemson. Like a really nice showing from them.
This is a. I don't think you can call it a resume booster win necessarily, but you can definitely call it the Clemson is back in the national conversation win. Like they beat them by enough where it's like, okay, Dabo isn't losing the program and going to retire at the end of the year or anything. So
it sounds crazy, but it was enough for me after watching what they did against Georgia to think, all right, the ACC still runs through Clemson. Like there's no doubt in my mind about that. Like I think Clemson will be in the ACC title game. It's a question of who else will be.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when we get to our playoff picks, I think we both have the same kind of viewpoint of what the ACC looks like right now. And compared to everybody else we've seen, they played Georgia in the first week on a neutral site. Like Georgia does that to everybody.
Yeah.
So,
all right, let's do a rapid fire through the rest of the ACC games. We'll get to VT Corner. BYU got the best of SMU on Friday night, 18-15. My takeaway from this, Sam, that Lashley offense, they need to be able to get some touchdowns. 5 field goals for them.
They're a mess. The whole program's a mess. They're the new Miami. Private school with a lot of money and no fans.
Duke beat Northwestern. This was the, you want to talk about nerd?
I don't want to talk about it.
They had the N and the D and ER. Someone had that poster from Northwestern and Duke. It was very funny. But really nice win for Manny Diaz in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what anybody says. You have to go to Chicago. Notre Dame. Northwestern was really good last year for what they were. They got a lot of nice wins, and they got that road win in Northwestern. Good win for Manny Diaz.
Horrible beat on the under. Horrible beat.
Yeah, dude. That got a lot of points late. All right. Pitt had an amazing comeback versus Cincinnati to win by 1 point, 28-27. I tweeted out that Pitt sucks again. And as Cincinnati was beating them down in the first half. And look what happens, man. Narduzzi makes me look foolish, as he's done many times. And that was a nice win for the ACC. I'll say that.
Really was. It looked like Cincinnati just refused to milk the clock there in the second half. Like they did everything they could to give the ball back to Eli Holstein and Pitt. So it's a really good win for Pitt. We'll see what they can look like getting to ACC play. That's a tough loss for Cincinnati, though. They should have won that game.
They should have. Cal beat Auburn. Robert Irby was all over this. You've got your Cal shirt on right now. Irby must have said Cal money line 3 times in the chat. He's like, you take Cal money line. And I was all over Cal plus 11.5. I didn't know if they'd actually get the win. But this is a bad look for Hugh Freeze, is my takeaway. Another loss at home to a team that you're favored by double digits.
Hugh Freeze is 5-11 in his last 16 games against FBS teams.
Yeah, and that goes back to Liberty, I'm sure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And I would also say that Cal football Twitter is amazing.
Oh, is that right? I'm not plugged in.
It's lit. There's like 40 of them max, but it's pretty awesome.
Okay, so UVA scored 14 points in the fourth to beat Wake by 1. Another 1-point win. This is a conference game, though. It was 30-17 entering the fourth quarter. 2 long drives ended in touchdowns. Big win for UVA. Calandria, exclamation point. I mean, he's going to throw interceptions. He did it in this game. but this is exactly why you start him instead of Musket.
Absolutely. And this is exactly how UVA can win games. If like they might be a team that kind of thrives in the chaos.
Yeah.
And they're not particularly good at anything. But at this point, I feel like they're so used to playing in these really weird games that they're going to feel more comfortable. Wake Forest just looked really uncomfortable in that fourth quarter. That's a really bad loss for Dave Clawson. Like if you're trying to make a bowl game, that's when you're banking on. And I mean, defensively, Wake Forest couldn't stop anything past like middle of the third quarter. It's a good win for UVA though.
We have to talk about Bachmeier, dude. He looked pretty good, right? Like the numbers were pretty good. I mean, his QBR wasn't good, but Donovan Green makes it easy on him. Donovan Green is so good. 2 receivers in this game had 11 catches. Malachi Fields had 11 for UVA, and Donovan had 11 for Wake. So it was basically 2 guys going back and forth on that field.
I mean, Wake had the ball on UVA's side of the field with like a minute left, and they fumbled, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
I worry about Wake Forest's mentality after this game.
This was the game they needed to get for sure. You're at home. You're playing UVA. But for UVA Maryland, now, like UVA has a much better shot at a bowl game now.
That's a fun, old-fashioned ACC rivalry game. Maryland is coming to Charlottesville. They're trying their darndest to get a crowd to that game. UVA is so that'll
next
be a
weekend
fun game.
That's happening.
Yes, whatever the over is.
Oh, that's right. I have that written down here.
I mean, that game has like 45-40 written all over it.
And the UVA secondary, for as good as it is for UVA to get that win, the secondary might be really bad.
Yeah, might be bad.
All right, so VT corner. VT beat Marshall 31-14. It was a really ugly first half. No one will tell you otherwise. The offense struggled big time. Drones looked uncomfortable. The offense had 0 rhythm in the first half. And to me, Sam, it seemed like Bowen refused to commit to the run early for some reason, even though I thought it was working to a point.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were definitely a better running team than they were a passing team in the first half. But it just seems like they're trying so hard to scheme guys open with the same stuff they ran last year. And it's just getting covered up and they don't have any other options. And you're flushing Kyron out of the pocket. So it doesn't look good offensively. What I will say, though, is I never felt like Tech was in jeopardy of losing that game. I never felt it, even when...
No, I would agree.
I agree. Never felt that way. The defense was locked down, and you could tell it was more the Virginia Tech offense messing up than
they
was
couldn't
the
pull
Marshall
their head
defense
out of their
making
ass.
plays. Yes.
I mean, that's what was happening. And it was frustrating because was it in the first half or the second half where we got down to the 1 or the 2-yard line and we didn't run the ball. Like we had gotten down there because he finally started calling some runs and like inside zone type stuff, like running right down the field. And we get down there and then they call that pass play. Kyron like flips it out to the side as he's falling down. It's a penalty, whatever. They take him back. We don't score. And I had to stop tweeting because even though I've gotten older and better at reacting to games in the game, I have a really hard time of like collecting my thoughts still. And I was just so infuriated that they refused to commit to the run because even though we have these wide receivers, even though we're projecting Kyron to come back and have an amazing year, we are not a pass first team. Mm-hmm. In all of the games that Brent Pry has been here, any game where we try to be more of a passing team, we don't play well. We don't move the ball well. It happened against Marshall just last year.
Yeah, and dude, it's so frustrating because also they had they had like a 3rd and inches and a 4th and inches, and they threw on both of those plays. Dude, just push. Your quarterback's massive. If you're at the goal line, guess what? Tuden's his best quality as a running back and what NFL scouts are looking at him for is as a goal line running back. Just line up and give him the ball. Line up and pistol. Turn around.
They would have scored without a doubt.
They would have scored the first play.
Yeah.
And that's what's so frustrating. You feel like they're trying offensively to score in the most beautiful, perfect way.
Just to be something they're not.
dude,
that's what was happened against the first half against Vandy too.
it is.
that
It is.
Listen, I know Vandy was keen on the run and we were having a hard time moving the ball, but we were like trying to move it on the outside. And like we saw against Marshall, when we were calling those inside plays, like they could not stop us. And it was evident by what happened in the second half because they called 27 runs to 5 passes in the second half. The first drive in the second half, how many runs did we have, Sam?
11
of
12 plays.
11 runs, 1 pass on that first drive. Scored easily, scored again, because we committed to the run and it allowed, I think we got the Felton touchdown at one point in the second half. So 3 points, though, in the first half is unacceptable. You're like offensive points. I know we had a great return by Jalen Lane, but 3 offensive points against Marshall when we had lots of possessions. That was really poor.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. And I think it's to the point where internally, I'm wondering if they're having conversations like they had after that Marshall game of, okay, whatever you're doing is not working. You have to change it. Like there is no, we'll watch the film and look at it. Like you have to change how you are approaching games. One thing I will say though, is the pass protection, I think, is the biggest issue right now because the wide receivers are getting open downfield a lot. Kyron just doesn't have time. I think that's one of the issues with running an offense with this much motion and smoke and mirrors, whatever you want to call it, movement, is Kyron has 1, maybe 2 reads on almost every play. He never really has a pass skeleton going out there with 4 wide. And so when that first or second isn't there, it turns into Kyron run around mode.
Yeah.
And sometimes when Kyron pulls his eyes down and tucks it, there's a guy right there because the offensive line isn't good enough to give him 2.5, 3 seconds. And so I think it stems from your offensive line not being quite good enough, but you're not giving him enough options. There was a 3rd and 4. I think Tech had the ball on like the 5-yard line. It was that touchdown pass to Felton, 3rd down and 4. There was only 2 routes ran. There was a swing route to Jalen Lane, and then there was a little hook zone finder route by Felton in the back of the end zone. If both of those are covered up, Kyron probably gets sacked, and you're kicking a field goal.
And he already got sacked 3 times on 3rd down in this game.
Virginia Tech is one of the most sacked teams in the country right now.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks, but they have 8 sacks. I think it's the worst in the ACC, right? So
it's worse in the ACC. I think it's 130th out of 130 or whatever we're at now.
And some of that's O-line, some of that's holding the ball, some of it's scheme, but it goes back to the main point on offense, which is we are not good enough offensively to be a pass first team. We must run the ball to open up the pass. Our run blocking first year under Pry, second year under Pry, and right now is so much farther ahead than the pass blocking. And you have to rely on it.
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of the players you have. Like I think they have better pass blockers than better run blockers than pass blockers on this offensive line.
Yeah.
I would also say, dude, this is kind of a classic Beamer Bowl win.
Yeah.
Like offense looks terrible. You can't do anything. You get a special teams touchdown and your defense just locks down.
Do you remember Robbie's hot take that the defense would win us like 4 or 5 games or something like that?
I mean, this is
is one of them.
Like I think they had 12 pass breakups, which is the most that they've had since the 80s, I believe. Like crazy defense.
That was the best stat of the day, was the 12 pass breakups on defense. The most alarming stat. So I want to give kudos. That 12 pass breakups is crazy. Like Sam said, you do not see that. It's the most in 8 seasons that CFB stats had. And like you said, I think it went back like a couple of decades.
Yeah, Hokie Sports goes back. It's a tough stat to keep, though. Yeah. Like you don't really trust it. Sure. But it's 12 is a huge.
It's one of the most in our history, without a doubt. I mean, 12 pass breakups in a game is crazy. But the most alarming was 0 catches for Ollie Jennings. It's something we'll talk a little bit more about on the Two Deep Show. Before we close out VT Corner, it was really great to see the defense play the way that they did. After that Vandy debacle, they gave up just 278 yards. And in reality, this game was like 2 plays for Marshall offensively, which got them the 1 touchdown. And then the other touchdown was because of a special teams blunder, which I'm hoping isn't a theme, Sam.
Over the last couple of years, special teams blunders have kind of been a theme, and penalties, like procedural penalties. So
But
Tech is not.
I'm proud
Tech
of the defense.
looks a little rusty. Defense looked great. They had a ton of attitude. I loved it. There was really only one big offensive play for Marshall, and it was a pretty well ran trap run. So,
and that guy is good. Like that running back, he had a 100-yard game. So like, if you want to knock the defense a little bit, like it was a 100-yard game for that guy. 69 yards came on one play, but I think that's a good player. He had a really sweet touchdown in the Stony Brook game. Like he's good.
He's averaging like 16 yards a carry. Like he's good. And that offense, they were shook from the moment. Like Tech had them on lockdown the whole time.
The quarterback was awful. And
quarterbacks, they don't have a quarterback.
What we did, but like that quarterback was really bad. We should say that too.
Air raid offense with a bad quarterback is an interesting choice.
Yeah. We'll go into more detail about Marshall and ODU. So I have a bunch of things. I know you got some notes on that too. We want to talk about with ODU later in the week. Other notable games, Sam, and I'm kind of run through these. Bama scored 28 in the fourth to make the score against USF look better, but that was a tight game. And if USF could hit any passes, they might have had a chance to win the game. South Carolina beat Kentucky. That one surprised me.
Surprised me too.
And it wasn't a beating. Like it was a beating. It wasn't just a beat. They beat them 31-6.
Yeah, long story short,
Lexington.
I think Kentucky needs to hit the reset button on football. Stoops is out. He doesn't want to coach anymore, and that team knows it.
Doesn't want to coach anymore. All right, save that for a second. Save that for a second. Michigan State beat Maryland. And this was a game that a lot of people were picking Maryland to win. Childs goes in there and gets the dub.
I did the turtle thing.
You did?
Here. Yeah. Michigan State, dude. They're going to be a well-coached team. Childs is a fun quarterback.
They have a good coach. I mean, that Jonathan Smith is a good coach.
Yep.
Arizona State beat Mississippi State. They got up big. They held on. A little West Coast football for you guys. Beating up on the SEC there. Number 19, Kansas got taken down by Illinois 23-17. Nice win for the Big Ten in that matchup. Washington State crushed Texas Tech. Texas Tech has problems.
They look terrible defensively. And
on both games, right?
Terrible offensively. Yes.
And then this is a game you were talking about. Texas State dominating win over UTSA.
Texas State. I watched the condensed game today during lunch because I'm sick like that.
You're a psychopath, yeah.
Dude, Texas State could have scored like 65, 70 points in that game. Like they stopped playing in the fourth quarter. They were
because they're friends. That's what they like the coaches are friends.
Oh yeah, like they were virtually taking knees there. And Texas State has a really fun matchup with the team you just talked about, Arizona State, this week in San Marcos. That's going to be a really fun game. Texas State, I think they are right behind Memphis and Boise State now for the leaders in the pack to be the G5 representative.
And that quarterback on Texas State, it's McLeod, right? The kid from JU just last year who was 10-0. So that's a good-ass quarterback. And I was very surprised when he didn't land at a bigger program. And there might have been grades. There might have been something else going on. He might have been late in the cycle.
He was late. He was really late in the cycle. And Texas State basically they basically said, oh, this guy's available. Yeah, every other quarterback just go somewhere else because we're bringing in this guy.
McLeod is good, man.
Very good.
ECU beat ODU 20-14. I bring that up because we play ODU this weekend. And I was kind of hoping ODU would get that win. I don't really care.
Me too.
But it's also crazy to see ODU keep it as close as they did versus Scar. And then Beamer and South Carolina go and whip Kentucky, and then they lose to ODU. Like that's college football in a nutshell. Like weird stuff happens all the time.
And that was a weird game too. Like ECU had a ton of offense, but only 20 points because they threw 4 interceptions in ODU's half the field.
And
it was kind of a weird game. They missed an extra point. Like ODU's offense though is not good.
Their offensive line is bad, and that could be very favorable for us. Liberty needed 21 fourth quarter points to beat New Mexico State 30-24. Why New Mexico State? You always come so close to beating them and you can't do it. It's so annoying.
I was watching that game on the couch late at night. New Mexico State trying their hardest. There was a sack fumble return that Liberty had.
Yeah.
That play doesn't happen. New Mexico State wins that game.
Okay, before our playoff predictions, Sam, stock up, stock down. I want you to give me 3 teams that you think after this week, their stock is up.
Pretty obvious Texas. I mean, you go into the big house and you dominate like that. I think they are now not only in the playoff, locked for the playoff. I think they are in the national title conversation. The aforementioned Texas State Bobcats. That was one of the tricky games on their schedule against UTSA, and they crushed them. So they get some style points. They'll have a chance again for some non-conference style points against Arizona State. So watch out for the Bobcats. And then the other team I had, we talked about them, but Tennessee. They are on wagon watch. They are really good. They are a team that can, they didn't even play well offensively, and they scored 51 points.
Yeah.
I think that's a team to really, really look at. They're fun, dude. And Nico's awesome.
Because of our conversation with Evan, some of my notes from before, I missed, but it's going to work out well because on my stock up and stock down teams, we're going to cover this. So my stock up teams are Tennessee. Talked about that game already. You already had them. Good. Nebraska. I thought beating Colorado like that and with a freshman quarterback, Matt Rule's proof of concept. I hate that phrase, but I'm using it. It's coming true. And I just thought Nebraska, they haven't had a marquee kind of win like that, even though it wasn't a ranked team in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And Iowa State, a team that you really liked. We didn't talk about the Cyhawk, but they were down 13-0 in that game. They come back. They beat Iowa. Iowa hadn't given up a 13-point lead in years, a halftime lead. So really good win for Iowa State that may come up in the playoff predictions. Mm-hmm. And then stock down. I'll start here. Penn State. Just taken to the wire by Scott Loeffler and the Bowling Green Falcons.
Hey, I've said it for weeks, months even. Bowling Green's not a bad team. They're well coached. They have good offenses. The line was players.
Ridiculous.
I should have listened to you because I told you that Bowling Green was a good team.
Yeah.
And you said it was too big of a line, and I shame on me.
Because think about it, and if they had won that money line, it would have been 15x.
That would have been the best thing to happen to Marcus Freeman in weeks.
Yes, for sure. But Penn State stock down. I want to talk about that a little bit more in a second. Oregon stock down and Oklahoma stock down for me because they squeaked by Houston. Another game that was a 4 TD favorite, which also was bogus. I had Houston, but they shouldn't have won by 4 or 2 or whatever it was.
Yeah. We didn't cover my stock downs, but Notre Dame's a pretty obvious one. They're probably out of the playoff. Kentucky, about them, Stoops doesn't like the new era of college football at all. He's been very adamant about it. He doesn't like being at Kentucky right now, I don't think, with the whole football school versus basketball school thing.
He was bitching about NIL. The fans need to give more. He makes so much goddamn. Shut up.
Yeah, just shut up, dude. He does not want to coach anymore. He is going to retire at the end of this year. I'm banking on it.
No.
Yeah, He's retiring at the end of this year. I'm telling you.
He's already got one foot out the door after that performance.
Yep. And then my other one was Auburn. Cal is a fine team, but Cal is missing 2 starting wide receivers. They're missing 2 starting offensive linemen. You're playing at home. You didn't play anybody in week 1. This is Hugh Freeze for you. He's going to put up offense. I don't care who the guy recruits. He doesn't win a lot of football games. He just doesn't. And I'm
you're gonna have to argue with Billy Ray about this one. I don't know.
the only 2 years that he has been wire to wire a very successful coach at a high level, they were cheating their butts off.
And he was buying hookers left and right.
I mean, it's just
maybe that's what he means.
And look, I think they're all in for next year. They didn't use the NIL money in the portal. They have Peyton Thorne as their quarterback. Yeah, I mean they're all in for next year. But man, they're going to get rocked in the SEC again.
All right, here's the good stuff. We're going to get the playoff predictions right after I tell you that College Football Monday is brought to you by Rhoback. Rhoback is the performance activewear designed for those that crave activity. They have the new drop with whether it's the Lane Stadium one or the one with the helmets, the hoodie with the TV logo, which is so sweet, and then the quarter zip with the VT on it. You got to get one of those. Use code 2DEEP VT for 20% off your order. They got great women's stuff, dresses. They just put out a whole bunch of new stuff. And if you have a household with 2 teams, I think Sam said this last time, they got tons of teams available. So you got an Ohio State fan, a Virginia Tech fan. That's what Robbie's house has. You can get both of those. They got a really sweet Ohio polo, which I and there's some schools where like I almost wish I was a fan of them because some of their stuff is so sweet.
Yeah, orange and maroon don't match with a lot. Let's just be straight up about that.
You can also go grab the state polo of where you live. Like New Jersey's, it's got a red state in New Jersey on it. I live in New Jersey. I know it's for Rutgers, but like I would wear a red state in New Jersey. That's where I live. Maybe you go grab the state where you live. But make sure you use code 2DVT if you do for 20% off your order. Roback Crave Activity. All right. You want me to go first or you with your playoff picks?
You go first.
All right. I'll put mine up. All right. There's a small change here to what I had initially. In the SEC, I have moved Missouri out and I have moved Tennessee in. Tennessee is in my playoff right now. I got 5 teams from the SEC. It's Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Alabama. And those are more or less in order for me. Big Ten, I've got Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State in, though I don't feel terribly good about those 3 picks. I think USC is on the heels of either Oregon or Penn State. In the ACC, I still have Clemson and Miami, no change. In the Big 12, I just have Utah, no change. And I have my G5 champ as Boise. I thought about Memphis. I thought about Texas State, but I'm leaving it as Boise because they did perform so well against the top 10 team. So that is my playoff picks, and I'll put yours up. You can talk about them, then we can kind of go back and forth here.
Yeah, mine are pretty similar. I think the only difference we have is I have Iowa State in there instead of Tennessee. I really like Tennessee. I think they can play their way into this, but I just look at the schedule, and I don't know. Do they get to 10-2? Like that's asking a lot. And at 10-2, 9-3, they have a tough SEC schedule, but not tougher than Alabama's. And I understand Alabama has a lot of issues now, but I'm going to bank on them winning 10 games until they don't. And at their schedule, 10-2, and the brand name Alabama, they're getting in. And I look at Iowa State's schedule. That was one of their toughest games of the season at Iowa. They have a pretty favorable Big 12 schedule after this. I think this is a scenario, as well as the ACC, where the 2 teams in the conference title get in and you're playing for that bye. I envision that being the case. In the Big 10, I'm sticking with it. They've won both the games. It's all to play for them. Ohio State's a wagon. Penn State, I know they had a tough game against Bowling Green, but I still like what they're able to do offensively.
They're a good team.
Yeah. And Boise is the best probably right now. Next week, we might have a different team, depending on how Memphis looks against Florida State and how Texas State looks against Arizona State.
Yeah, the way I looked at it from the G5 thing is that if they played Memphis right now, I would take Boise. If they played Texas State right now, I would take Boise. And that's not going to happen on the field, but that's how I'm thinking of it in my head. And with that performance, a 3-point loss in Autzen, like I think that might be almost as good as beating them. Like almost as good.
Yeah.
Like if they have one loss at the end of the year, Sam, and Liberty is undefeated. Like,
it's Boise State.
They're going to take Boise.
Yeah. And another thing that we haven't talked about quite yet is this SEC grouping. Everyone's saying 5 teams. If Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, if they have a couple of bad injury weeks, you could lose 2 games right there. Or you could, have a bad loss to an Arkansas.
Well, let me
explain
Mississippi
State, something like that.
Let me explain my Tennessee pick. One of the reasons I took them is because they host Alabama, and they will likely, at this point, be favored in that game. They have to go to Oklahoma, which is a team that I'm down on now. They have to go to Arkansas, a team that is talented and could beat Tennessee, but I still feel like is unlikely, and Tennessee has a bye week the week before. So the real only bankable loss on the schedule for Tennessee is Georgia, and that's not a surefire loss either. And so I think because of them hosting Bama, if they get that win, which I think will happen, they have that head-to-head. If you get a head-to-head against Bama, you're gonna be in. Like that's kind of unless you lose 3 other games. I'm not foreseeing that.
Like I have Alabama in now. I could see Alabama getting picked apart by teams. Like I could
Their
see Georgia,
secondary is not
Tennessee.
looking so strong.
Yeah, I could see them getting picked apart. Ole Miss, they haven't played anybody. They've played 2 terrible teams to start.
So the
Missouri
reason I
looks really good. They played 2 terrible teams.
the reason I knocked Mizzou out, part of it, and this is part of the reason I it's not that I disagree with your picks, it's just an opinion that Iowa State, the brand name, like
That's
I
very
just
true.
feel like it could hurt
That's
them.
very
And the
true.
same thing with Missouri. Like Missouri has to go to Bama, whereas Bama has to go to Knoxville. And so I kind of tiered those teams as where the home team was playing. And that's the best I can do at this point.
What's so funny about this is I could see anybody's prediction for the 12 and I'd be like, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I could see
why
that
not?
happening. Maybe. Yeah.
And like if USC and Penn State played this weekend, like I don't know who would win.
They
But
play in a
like
couple weeks.
and before the season, we would have been like, nah, Penn State should take care of that. But I don't know, man. Like I don't but LSU
winner
could
of
also
that
be
game-
bad. You know,
the winner
LSU
of-
could also be really bad.
They could be. The winner of Penn State USC is going to have so much national hype behind them.
Oh yeah.
That team gets in with 10.
Now, when is that game?
It's in a couple weeks and it's in
Yeah.
LA.
So this weekend, Bama plays Wisconsin, and we're going to talk about our week 3 games in a second. So we might as well start now.
Yeah.
Bama plays Wisconsin
Mhm.
in Camp Randall.
Yep.
And then the next week, Wisconsin has to play USC in LA. Like that is a tough turnaround for the Badgers, man.
That might be one of the tougher like back-to-back blue bloods you could put on a schedule.
Blue
in
bloods,
football.
but they all wear red.
That's facts. I kind of like Wisconsin with the points there at home against Camp Randall.
I mean,
That
if
secondary
Tyler
looks
Van Dyke, if
really
you can
bad for
get
Bama.
good Tyler Van Dyke, he might be able to do something, but that's a big if.
I'm just saying, like, you're giving me points in Camp Randall.
It's what is it? 16? Yeah, I would take that.
I mean, because
All right.
Bama can dominate that game and not cover the spread.
Arizona at K-State is another big game. K-State is 7-point favorites at home. They squeaked by Tulane this past weekend. Probably could have and should have lost that game. I'll say that coach who came from Troy and is at Tulane now, that guy is freaking good, man.
He's very, very good. He's a
All right.
Kentucky alum.
Oh, Sam's gotten something working behind the scenes here. He's negotiating
script.
deals.
Script leaked.
All right, LSU at South Carolina. That should be an interesting game. If we want to find out if LSU is actually decent this year, they have to go up against what's a pretty good D-line in South Carolina. So they're probably their best unit. No, they can't play offense, but they've got a good D-line. So let's see what LSU can do there. And it's on the road, Columbia.
Mhm.
And then BC at Mizzou, another fascinating game. Like, can Castellanos do anything down there?
I think you're gonna see BC come back to earth here in this game. Like I'm glad it's working out a little bit. Castellanos is really fun, but this is a different animal. And Mizzou is one of the more underrated, tough places to play in the country.
Yeah, I don't know what I do with the points. It's 16.5 to Mizzou.
I don't think you touch that. That's too many points there.
I think that BC will keep it short, though. They're going to run a lot. It might shorten the game, and they might cover because of that. But
Mizzou hasn't given up a point yet.
I know, but look at the opponents.
I mean, but
It's impressive. It's impressive. I'm not denying that.
they're saying.
All right, Tulane at OU. Is this the spot? I think they probably blew their wad this past weekend in Tulane, but
I mean,
they can cover.
They could definitely cover. Oklahoma's weird because like half of the stuff coming out of there is that this coaching staff really likes this team, and then the other half is like, oh, Oklahoma has problems.
Right.
I don't think this Oklahoma team is as deep as what we normally see from the Sooners, but I also think Jackson Arnold is a pretty darn good quarterback, and they're going to figure things out. And Tulane, you're right, like asking them to play at that level back-to-back weeks is going to be really tough. I think it'll be a fun game, though. It'll be a fun game.
You know what's a really fun game and an anxiety bowl for Florida State?
Oh,
Memphis going to Tallahassee. Tallahassee. Okay, Florida State, 7-point favorites at home. I'm terrified if I'm a Florida State fan. Terrified.
So when we do the Locks of Saturday articles on sonsofsaturday.com, at preseason, Brett, Robert, and I all picked teams that we would think that we would fade and teams that we think we would back against the spread this year.
Yeah.
We all said Florida State's a team to fade against the spread. Just the hype coming into the season, but with the quarterback they have that's really inconsistent, they lost so much on defense. Like, this is a team to fade. I'm still fading them, dude, until they prove they can. Memphis might just outscore them. Like, if Memphis does a mediocre output offensively for them, it's like 31 points. Can Florida State score 31 points against a FBS team? A good one?
Know.
Like, Memphis' defense was
really
not
bad
good last
DJU
year.
Last week, dude.
Memphis was not a good defense last year. But, like, neither was Boston College. Boston College was terrible defensively last year.
If Memphis gets this win, do they become the G5 favorite?
I think if Memphis gets this win, the only, like,
it's hard
Memphis
because
gets
maybe
this
Florida
win,
State
I
has an
don't
awful
see them
season,
not.
right?
Yeah, but also it's the jump up in competition is pretty significant. But again, like, Memphis would have to win their conference, right? Yeah, it has. That's why Boise State is so highly favored, because the Mountain West is down this year. Like, if they get to that championship game and win it, they're there. So,
and the AAC is down too, though, but there's still Tulane lurking. I just think that, like, this would be, regardless of how FSU looks, if Memphis gets this win, it clears a path for them.
Yeah, I think it does too. And as a Memphis Silly College Football Playoff ticket holder, go Tigers.
Can't go Tigers. All right. West Virginia at Pitt. We got backyard brawl. Pitt 2.5-point underdogs at home. I didn't think Pitt would be able to pull off the win at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And before the game even started, I think I took Cincy against the spread. So I don't know what's going to happen here. Like, the backyard brawl is completely unpredictable. I don't know. Like, I'm surprised it's not a pick 'em, to be perfectly honest with you.
I agree with you there. I think I wonder how much is being given to Pitt home field. It's not really a home field advantage, but it's a lot better than playing in Morgantown.
Yeah, but they're still underdogs.
I know. That's kind of the point, is like, do the models really favor West Virginia in this one? Like, I think West Virginia is a better football team. So this might, I usually like taking home dogs, but this is one where outside of like one quarter, Pitt hasn't looked good in a long time.
I think West Virginia is a better football team for sure. And when you factor in exactly what you're saying, like, that stadium is going to be full of Mountaineers. Like, there's going to be so many Mountaineer fans there. So I think I like West Virginia in that one too. And then Maryland at UVA. Talked a little bit about it earlier. UVA 2.5-point underdogs at home is like, I always dislike Maryland. It doesn't, like, no, of course I don't like UVA, but like, I think I might dislike Maryland more. I just think they don't have any identity. At least UVA, like, has this like Olympic sport identity, smart kid school identity. I don't know what Maryland is. I don't know why any football recruit would ever want to go to Maryland. And we lose a lot of recruits to them.
Yeah,
like, I just don't understand it.
I think they are. I think in the Athlon magazine this year, and maybe last year too, when they have the anonymous coaching scouts, the coach said about Maryland, they are more interested in recruiting than they are winning football games.
Absolutely.
Like, their staff is built to recruit, not to coach football games. That being said, I think I still like them in this game because of how poor UVA secondary looked against Wake Forest. Maryland can put up points. They will put up points. So any sort of turnovers from Calandria, and it could get away from them. So I think I like Maryland in this one. I love the over.
Taking the points, and I think that UVA could lose the game, but like, this has, like, there was a lot of 1-point games this weekend, Sam, like 1 and 2-point games. Like, I feel like this could be a 1 or 2-point game, and I'm going to take the points in that situation.
And UVA, we talked about it earlier, but like, they're a team that finds chaos in games.
Absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for the show. We covered just about everything. Talked for about 90 minutes. Thank you to Evan for coming on with us. It was fun. And I was happy. This was the first like real college football Monday during the season that we did together, Sam, because we had Mark Packer on a couple weeks ago. If you guys haven't seen that episode, I would go back and check it out. It'll hold up. There's still early enough in the season. It would be worth a watch, but we'll figure out who we're having on next week's show. We'd like to bring a guest on every week. Some weeks it'll just be me and Sam. Some weeks it may be just me. It may be just Sam, or like last week, Sam and Robert. But we're going to be here 8 p.m. Monday nights. Make sure you always join us. Make sure you join Sam 7 to 9 p.m. at Aslan in Virginia Beach, the new location. It looks awesome. We put the thing on our Twitter. It's on our Instagram. So show up on Friday. Enjoy the game this weekend. We'll be back on Wednesday to chat about Marshall, ODU, and all the rest. Till next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.